From Vermont Public, this is The Frequency. I'm Mitch Wertlieb. It's Saturday, May 3rd, which means you're listening to a special weekend edition of the podcast featuring the Capitol Recap. Coming up, how the uncertainty over future federal funding is affecting Vermont's state budget. That's after this. Crafting a budget can be tough work under any circumstances, but trying to write a spending plan when you don't know how much revenue will be coming in makes the job even tougher. That's the challenge facing Vermont lawmakers right now. And in this week's edition of the Capitol Recap, Vermont Public senior reporter Bob Kinzel talks with Peter Hirschfeld about the uncertainty over the future of federal funding.
Pete, this has to be one of the most unusual budget years in recent memory. And that's because there is so much uncertainty about the status of hundreds of millions of dollars of federal funds. The Republican-controlled Congress is expected to consider a new federal budget in the coming months, one that is likely to contain some big cuts, primarily in many human services programs. So to say that there are a lot of unknowns for lawmakers to consider when drafting a Vermont budget this year doesn't really seem to convey just how much uncertainty there really is.
Lawmakers and the governor generally budget to revenues, right? They craft a state budget based on a very keen understanding of almost exactly how much revenue is going to come into the state next year. The lack of certainty over a key critical portion of those revenues, federal revenues, which make up about a third of Vermont state's budget, is hovering in a very menacing way over budget writing talks in Montpelier right now.
Given all the questions about the future of federal funding, and there is a lot of money, as you mentioned, how are lawmakers trying to deal with this situation?
Washington County Senator Andrew Perchlik said, I want to be straight with folks. There is nothing we can do in the State House to prepare for what he calls a worst-case scenario. But he says there are contingencies Vermont can adopt that would give it some flexibility to try to offset or backfill some of that lost federal revenue if those budget proposals materialize. For example, the Senate is talking about postponing some key spending initiatives. We're talking about things like rate increases for healthcare agencies that serve low-income Vermonters, postponing those until November 1st so that that money doesn't go out the door until lawmakers know more about the federal funding picture and can at that point decide, hey, do we still want to spend this money for this purpose, or do we want to maybe reconsider using it for something else that has become a more urgent need due to federal cuts?
So that would be delaying the rate increases for at least several months. Are there some concerns about the impact that would have?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're talking about healthcare organizations like community mental health providers, federally qualified healthcare centers that serve a key role in Vermont's healthcare system, which is teetering on the brink, as we know. And some of these agencies are the most financially stressed organizations in that system. So absolutely, there's going to be some pushback against the idea that we can push the pause button on getting what a lot of people say is critical funding to agencies that are in critical need.
So if lawmakers come back in November to rewrite portions of the state budget and to consider the budgets of these delayed programs that you're talking about, will some people want to consider tax increases instead of making program cuts?
There are people that would love to consider tax increases now, even in advance of these state cuts. Remember, we're just a year away from House Democrats passing legislation that would have increased state income taxes on the highest earning Vermonters by 3%. So that will absolutely be a conversation. And if the cuts are severe enough, you could see a critical mass of Democrats getting behind that sort of plan.
Governor Phil Scott plays a very important role in the consideration and debate over a new state budget. What does he think about this overall wait-and-see approach that lawmakers are taking that you just outlined?
Phil Scott acknowledges that there is a potential for a federal funding cliff ahead, and he's generally on board with the idea that if those cuts are severe enough, then the full legislature will probably have to come back in the fall and figure out a way to balance the state budget. He also doesn't want elected officials in Vermont to get distracted or paralyzed by the chaotic run of show in D.C., right? He wants to keep the focus on things Vermont can control, education reform, for example, housing. He says, we'll deal with the federal cuts if and when they come, but let's not let that prospect steal our focus from the priorities we can address right now. And I should note, Bob, that the governor has some real problems with the legislature's budget as it stands. He says it spends too much money, and in some instances spends that money on the wrong things. He's indicated he won't support the budget that Senate lawmakers finalize this week. And that means some high-stakes negotiations here in the next couple of weeks to avoid yet another veto of a state budget.
That was Vermont Public's Bob Kinzel speaking with reporter Peter Hirschfeld, and you can check out the full story at vermontpublic.org. Thanks for listening to The Frequency today. Today's episode was edited by Liam Elder Connors, and our music is by Blue Dot Sessions. I'm Mitch Wertlieb, and I'll talk to you soon.
Planet Money helps you understand the economy. We find the people at the center of the story.
Garbage in New York, that was like a controlled substance.
We show you how money influences everything.
Tell me what you like by telling me how you spend your money.
And we dig until we get answers.
I had a bad feeling you were going to bring that up.
Planet Money finds out. All you have to do is listen. The Planet Money Podcast from NPR.